Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the first Halloween horror movie review of 2022. So, not quite a movie this time, but a special, and a very special at that, because after many, many years of hoping and praying against all odds, we got a Halloween special of Werewolf by Night. And not only that, but it features another one of my favorite Marvel monsters, the ManThing. So, as a longtime fan of the comics, you might be wondering, how does it compare to the comics? Did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? Did they change things in a good way, or a bad way, or a indifferent way? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Werewolf by Night on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. So, Werewolf by Night. Right off the bat, I knew we were in for a treat because it goes to the opening logos, and the sound briefly goes to monaural sound and slightly lo-fi, so it sounds like an old film. And it's all in black and white as well, mostly black and white. There's black and white and a little bit of red, but mostly black and white, so it really has this old school film look. In fact, there's even one part, about 16 or so minutes in, I think, where you see a cigarette burn appear up in the corner, just to indicate a real change. Of course, the whole thing was filmed digitally, but it had some film effects and a little bit of like scratchiness and stuff added to it, just kind of for that old school texture. So that was a nice subtle touch that I definitely appreciated. So, the story opens, I should mention, by the way, this is a spoiler-filled review. There's a lot of very specific things I want to talk about, so if you haven't seen the special yet, and you want to avoid spoilers, you might want to pause now, go watch the special, it's only like 52 minutes, it won't take you that long, and then come back and you can hear my thoughts on it. Otherwise, if you don't care about spoilers, carry on. Alright, so the story opens with several people going to this beautiful old mansion, and we quickly learn that they are all monster hunters, and they are there to partake in a special sort of competition. They've all kind of had the honor of being invited because of their kill count over the years, the number of monsters that they've dispatched. So, without question, there is no doubt at all that the supernatural officially fully exists in the MCU at this point. There are monsters. Now, the interesting thing is, not all monsters are necessarily evil. So, this seems like a bit of a gentle allegory about big game hunting and how people are just after trophies and, you know, increasing their score, as it were, sort of for clout or what have you, with their fellow hunters. So all these hunters show up and they're basically given a challenge, and that is to defeat a monster that has been captured. And there's sort of a labyrinthine grounds around the mansion. So they're all going to be set loose. They can find weapons out there in the grounds to fight this monster. They have no idea what the monster is, or what they're going to be facing, or what it will take to kill it. But if they win, then they get the Bloodstone. Now, the Bloodstone, they don't really go into sort of what it is too much in the show, but to give you a little bit of background, the Bloodstone is something that's been in the Marvel Universe, in the comics, for quite a number of years. And it's kind of a family heirloom for the Bloodstone family. So, in this case, the patriarch of the family has died, and he only has one heir, and that's Elsa Bloodstone, who has kind of shirked her family duties over the years, and thus has been written out of the will. Needless to say, she shows up for the competition nevertheless. Now, the Bloodstone itself is essentially a gem, a glowing red gem with some kind of supernatural properties. Now, in the comics, the possessor of that gem gets a lot of side benefits, such as immortality, immunity to vampirism, and increased stamina, and increased durability. So essentially, it makes you effectively invulnerable and unkillable by most normal means. So it basically protects the wearer against all means of natural and unnatural attack. Oh, also faster healing ability, so you kind of become like Wolverine, I guess. Anyway, needless to say, for these monster hunters that go up against some pretty formidable foes, it's quite the prize. But there's only one of them. So the contest is put together by a woman named Verussa, played by the always wonderful character actress Harriet Sansom Harris. And she was basically the lover of Ulysses Bloodstone, who was Elsa's father and the patriarch of the family. So given that there can only be one possessor of the Bloodstone, the stakes are quite high, and all bets are off as far as how the winner chooses to get the Bloodstone. Meaning, we essentially have a bit of a most dangerous game / battle royale situation. So it's every hunter for themselves to defeat the monster and get the Bloodstone. So they have to defeat the monster in order to get the Bloodstone, because the Bloodstone itself has been embedded in the monster. So they have to kill the monster in order to extract the Bloodstone from it. And of course, the Bloodstone itself, having supernatural properties, and this being a supernatural creature, causes said creature incredible pain, making it much angrier and more difficult to kill. So, of course, being Werewolf by Night, we're kind of, at this point, automatically assuming that the monster in question is probably the werewolf. But it isn't. One of the hunters, who is probably the most normal looking of all of them, other than he has some kind of ghoulish / tribal makeup on to honor his ancestors, he says, apparently knows the monster. They're actually friends with each other. And at one point, he meets up with the monster. You see this big hand come and grab him, and you think, oh, that's it, he's done. But then you see who the monster is. The bushes part, and it's ManThing. Now, I knew that ManThing was going to be in this special, but they were very hush-hush about what the story was and everything, so I didn't know how much he would figure into it. But he's actually a very significant part of it. I mean, he's the monster that they're going after. Jack basically says, well, okay, let's just kind of play through everything here. We'll take care of the hunters, and then I'll get the Bloodstone off of you, and then we can get out of here. He ends up teaming up with Elsa, and then the two of them together help to get ManThing out of there. But then that's where it all goes wrong. Once the other hunters see that Jack helped ManThing escape, he becomes a target. Even more specifically, when Jack tries to grab the Bloodstone and is repelled by it, because Jack himself is a supernatural being. Specifically, he's the werewolf. Dun dun dun! Of course, those of us who knew the comics, as soon as we heard his name was Jack, we knew who he was. Because, of course, in the comics, his name is Jack Russell, yes, like the dog. In the special, we only ever know him as Jack. I don't think we ever find out his last name. So then they capture him, and basically the Bloodstone can be used to trigger his werewolf transformation, even though it's not going to be a full moon for another 5 nights. So they put him in a cage with Elsa, trigger the werewolf transformation, thinking that he's going to kill Elsa, but he basically sniffs her to, remember her scent, and in the hopes that when he becomes the werewolf, where normally he's not cognizant of what he's doing, he just kind of blacks out and has no idea what the werewolf is, just becomes a creature of pure instinct. He sniffs Elsa, all her hair and her neck and her arms and her hands and stuff, just to try to get her scent in his mind, because he knows he's about to become the werewolf, in the hopes that if he does end up confronting her, he'll recognize her instinctively and not kill her. Now, I gotta say, when the werewolf finally shows up and all hell breaks loose, wow, that is everything I wanted from that special right there. I mean, being a big fan of the comics for a long time, as great as the ongoing saga of the story is, it's always so much fun whenever he becomes the werewolf and just raises hell. Sometimes it's quite scary because of situations similar to that where there is an innocent involved and he really doesn't want to harm the innocent, but he has no control over the werewolf, so he has to try to figure out ways to prevent that from happening. So it really creates some interesting dynamics in the comics, and I'm glad that they kind of brought that aspect of it into the special. I mean, being only a 52-minute special, there's only so much they can go into, so much they can do. I knew they weren't going to really get into the epic saga that's in the comics. It was more just kind of going to touch on the basics of the concept, and I hope that if it does well, that we'll see more of this character. Needless to say, the werewolf breaks out of the cage and begins to just wreak havoc everywhere. He's dispatching the hunters left and right. There's like armed guards that show up, and there's this wonderful scene that takes place in this sort of enclosed room where a door is slowly lowering, and the only light source in the room is the light coming from that door. And as the door is lowering, the werewolf is just tearing through these guards left and right, and there's actually blood splattering on the screen as we're watching, so the screen is becoming obscured with blood splatter. This is easily the goriest thing the MCU has ever done. Period. By the way. So it's becoming obscured from all the blood splatter and all the chaos of the werewolf just ripping everybody to shreds, and the door slowly closing, and by the time the door closes, he's dispatched everybody. Now, I should say, regarding that, the excessive violence and bloodshed in this, apparently that's one of the reasons they did it in black and white, was so that they could essentially have R-rated level violence, but get a TV-14 rating. Michael Giacchino was apparently kind of surprised when the rating came out, because he really wanted to push it for an R with the violence. And he did, but I guess because it was black and white, that kind of obscures the bloodshed a little bit, and they were able to pull off a TV-14 rating. Or, you know, it's technically like TV-17 or whatever the R equivalent is on Disney+, but Disney just kind of chickened out and wanted to keep the rating a little lower. So, you know what this reminds me of? Growing up in the 80s, this is like what PG was like in the 80s. It was basically R-rated violence, but just without the swearing and boobs. So that's what this is. This is like an 80s PG thing. So needless to say, by the end, all is well. All the hunters are dispatched. Everybody's been taken care of. All the bad guys are dead. Elsa gets the Bloodstone and settles in as the new master of the Bloodstone household. By the way, in the comics, she is one major badass monster hunter. So I really hope, with us seeing the monster side of the Marvel Universe starting to get some screen time, Blade right around the corner, that we see more of Elsa Bloodstone, because she's a great character. I really liked her a lot in this. So Jack takes off. Man-Thing shows up to find him, and Elsa just indicates which way he went, and Man-Thing goes off after him to find him. So next thing we know, Jack's back to human form the next morning. Man-Thing has very politely made coffee for him. What a pal. And, and they just kind of have a little bit of banter back and forth. Now, Man-Thing, of course, can't talk, but he kind of reacts to things that Jack says. So there's, like, you know, very obvious interaction between them, and you can kind of suss out what they're talking about. That was something that was definitely changed from the comics, which I guess we should get into some of the changes from the comics. So we'll start with Man-Thing. So Man-Thing looks amazing. Like, he absolutely looks like he stepped right out of the comics. And largely practical effects, apparently. There's very little CG in this. They actually did almost everything practical, which I was really impressed by. The whole design of Man-Thing is spot on perfect. He looks fantastic. So that they absolutely nailed. Definitely a lot better than the old 2005 movie. In terms of the characterization, in the original comics, Man-Thing was more kind of a force of nature. He didn't really have any conscious intelligence. He was driven purely by instinct. As such, he wasn't really able to communicate with people so much. He was an empath in the purest sense, where he would literally feel the emotions of whoever was in his presence. And that's one of the things that I was looking for with this, because this is something they didn't do in the movie, and it just drove me nuts, was if anyone shows fear in front of him, the way the Man-Thing feels someone's fear as an empath is it causes him physical pain. He interprets it instinctively as an attack. So, instinctively, he reaches out to put an end to the source of that pain, in this case, the person's fear. So he'll grab hold of the person who is showing extreme fear and sets them on fire. That's why the tagline for the comics for a long time was, "Whoever knows fear burns at the Man-Thing's touch." And that's very literally the case. If you feel fear in the presence of the Man-Thing, you will burn. He will grab you and it's like spontaneous combustion. You just instantly go up in flames and you're dead. A very fast but extremely painful way to die. So when Jack is explaining to Elsa that he knows the monster, and she asks, what is he called? And he says, his name is Ted. He's never actually referred to as ManThing in the special. He's only ever referred to as Ted. Because, of course, originally he was Ted Sallis, who was a biochemist working on a super soldier serum. Yes, the same super soldier serum that made Captain America. Well, not the same one, but he was looking to duplicate it, basically. Things went horribly wrong. He ended up dying in the swamp. And the mystical qualities of the swamp mixed with the super serum, mixed with his rotting corpse, turned him into the Man-Thing. That's a very simplified version of the origin story, but that's the gist of it. So other than kind of giving Man-Thing a little bit more consciousness and ability to communicate, that's really a minor quibble, because the way it is in the comics is a lot of his feelings about the events going on around him are described in narrator panels and such. So it reads very well, but something like that would be very hard to translate to the screen. So I really don't have any problem with them giving him a little bit of consciousness so he's able to communicate, and a little bit more ways he can actually interact with people. In this case, his friendship with Jack. Now, in terms of Jack himself, in the comics, we meet him when he's quite young. Specifically, we meet him on the eve of his 18th birthday, because the way the werewolf curse works with him is his family is cursed, essentially, because his father was messing about with the Darkhold, something some of you MCU fans may be familiar with, because we've started to hear whispering mentions of the Darkhold in some of the recent movies and TV shows. Well, I have a feeling we're going to be hearing a lot more about it, because the Darkhold is a pretty important thing in Werewolf by Night lore. The Darkhold itself is essentially an ancient mystical book full of all kinds of supernatural weirdness. In the Werewolf by Night comics, it was thought at one point that the Darkhold had been destroyed, yet it keeps showing up again and again and again in the Marvel Universe, so I don't think it's quite so easy to destroy that book. So in this case, in the special, we're meeting Jack quite a bit later. At this point, he has a pretty good handle on the werewolf curse, and he takes steps to ensure that he doesn't hurt anybody when he turns. He explains to Elsa that when he turns, or when he knows there's a full moon around the corner, he locks himself up so he can't go off and hurt anybody. And then 3 days later, he unlocks himself and lets himself go back out, and he's fine for the rest of the month. So the significance of us meeting him in the comics, just as he's about to turn 18, is that's when the curse kicks in. So anyone in that bloodline, whenever they turn 18, that's when the lycanthropy curse begins. So whenever the next full moon is after that point, in the case of the comics, it just happened to be a full moon on his 18th birthday, because of course it was. That's when they will first turn into a werewolf. So the comics go into his journey of trying to figure out the curse and learn to live with it and try not to kill anybody. Yeah, it's a fantastic story, and I cannot possibly recommend it enough. If you're able to track down the comics, they put out the whole saga in 3 volumes a few years ago, and it's great stuff. Now, I think these are all out of print now, unfortunately, but I will include Amazon links anyway, because at the very least you should be able to get the Kindle versions. So check that out. And then, if you want to check out Man-Thing, there's another wonderful 3-volume set, which I will also include Amazon links for. I do get a little kickback for you if you use my Amazon links, of course, so I appreciate that. And that has all of the original Man-Thing comics in it, so mainly from the 70s through some of the more recent comics as well. So a lot of reading there that I'm sure you'll enjoy if you enjoyed the special. So anyway, yeah, back to the special. So we do meet Jack a little bit later in his life. He's very much an adult by this point, and you get the impression that he's been dealing with the werewolf curse for quite some time. So that's really it. I mean, that's really the only sort of big notable changes that stood out to me. And honestly, I had no problem with either of that. There's such minor things. Like, okay, yeah, we'll just kind of jump into where Jack's been a werewolf for a while, and that's fine. We don't need to go into the how and the why of that. I mean, if we return to the character at some point, we can always do a flashback to when he first turned, when he was a teenager or something. Have young Jack in a story or something. I don't know. Whatever. And then ManThing, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to explore with ManThing. I've already heard that the plan is to, I forget where I heard it. I wish I could put up a source for you, but anyway, I heard somewhere in my travels through the internet that the plan is to have ManThing at least 2 or 3 more MCU productions in the coming years. So definitely looking forward to that. Now, I didn't see a full-on ManThing movie on the slate or a series or anything, but who knows? Maybe we'll have a more ManThing-centric special next year or something like that. Who knows? I should mention also, I was kind of curious. I couldn't remember off the top of my head if ManThing and Werewolf by Night had ever met in the comics. Because, of course, in the special, they're good friends. They've obviously established some kind of friendship. I'd be curious to know the story behind that. I hope that maybe in a future special or something we can get the story of how that all came to be. Now, in the comics, they only met once, and very briefly, in the pages of Marvel Premiere, a story just called The Legion of Monsters, where basically they had a whole bunch of the sort of current monster characters from Marvel team up to fight another kind of weird supernatural menace. So it had Werewolf by Night, it had Man-Thing, it had Ghost Rider, and Morbius, the living vampire, all teamed up. At first they were all kind of fighting each other because they, monsters fighting monsters. They didn't know who any of these guys were. It was the first time any of them had met each other. But eventually they kind of settle their differences and deal with the common threat. So I looked in there, it's like, okay, is there some kind of hint of their friendship there? And no, there really isn't. It's just the final panel of that story shows the werewolf and Man-Thing going off together, but that's it. Like, we never see them together again in either comic series. So, I don't know. And they never did another team-up with those characters either. It was just kind of a one-off deal. So they never actually met again. Interesting to note, Jack Russell did meet Ghost Rider again at some point, quite a bit later, and they met in their human forms as well as their monster forms. So they got to know each other a little bit, but there was never a repeat meeting of Werewolf and Man-Thing. So I don't know. I'd be interested to know the story behind that, and if they ever intend to tell us. Otherwise, I mean, even if we don't know, I thought it was kind of funny having them be buddies. I kind of like that, actually, because they're both very much outcasts in their own unique ways. So it was kind of nice that they found each other somewhere in their travels and just kind of formed this friendship. The Man-Thing comics, Man-Thing as a character is a very, very lonely character. His friendships are very short-lived, usually ending in tragedy. And it's pretty heavy stuff a lot of the time. Werewolf, however, he does have friends that help him and stuff like that, so he's not all alone in the world. But again, being only an hour-long special, I guess it would have been a little too much to go into to bring all those other characters into it as well. But yeah, so I mean, as an introduction of these two of my all-time favorite Marvel monster characters into the MCU, I couldn't be happier. I really enjoyed this special a lot. I thought it was tight and fast-paced and a lot of fun. It was violent and gory, and I can imagine for those of you who weren't overly familiar with the characters, portions of it would be quite scary as well. Like, it works very well, and it really captured that sort of classic horror movie vibe as well. Oh, that's the other thing I was going to mention. When they did the scene in the enclosed room where Werewolf is ripping through all the guards, that reminded me of, also the fact it was black and white, was Kill Bill, when the bride is taking on the crazy 88, and it goes to black and white to make it not as gory. I still have yet to see the whole Bloody Affair version that came out in Japan that has that scene in color. But over here it was, of course, in black and white. So it almost felt like a sort of soft homage to that, which I thought was kind of fun. But yeah, great stuff. Oh, I should mention also the directorial debut of Academy Award-winning musician and movie music composer Michael Giacchino. I'm kind of mixed on Michael Giacchino's music, to be honest. I find some of his scores better than others. Like I liked his Batman score. I liked his music, the music he did for Lost. I wasn't wild about his Star Trek music. I thought it was kind of, I don't know, repetitive. But this one, he did the music for this one as well as directing it, and I thought it was great. Like, it really captured that sort of old school horror movie vibe very nicely, and the direction and look and production design and everything also captured that very well. So I felt almost like we were watching a Universal horror movie, but with, modern levels of violence, if that makes sense. So anyway, definitely gets a thumbs up from me. I really enjoyed Werewolf by Night, and I hope some of you did too. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you thought worked, what you thought didn't, and like that. And as I say, if you'd like to check out the comics, I will leave Amazon links. I should also mention I have done videos in the past about the comics. If you want to go and have a bit more of a deep dive on the Man-Thing and Werewolf by Night comics, I've done extensive videos on both. I'll include links to those in the description as well. Plus, if you want to get some idea of what the first attempt to bring Man-Thing to the screen was like, the 2005 movie, well, actually made in 2003 but released in 2005, whatever. I did a big review of that as well that also talks about how it, was and wasn't tied into the comics and whatnot, and just kind of went as deep as I could with it. So I'll include a link to that as well. So if you want more Man-Thing and Werewolf by Night action, there's lots more that you can check out in the description below. Alrighty, folks, that is it from me to you for now. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Big thanks to my Patreon sponsors. Be sure to catch me on Twitch. I stream just about every day, and I will see you next time. Until then, sayonara.